Oh, yeah. Hydrate.
Hello, 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 and welcome to Office Hours with the College Success Professor. We are live and we are excited and we are ready to go. I have my questions, but before we get started, let me introduce my guest. The first time we have had a guest on 2 times. So you're my first 2-time guest. And that should tell you a little bit of something about my guest. That means she is so good. I had to invite her on twice. So, Lisa, did you want to say hi before I got into your bio?
Well, hi. I'm so honored to be back for a second time. I loved our conversation before, and I like the fact that we're really talking about the why behind the why. Like, why are we talking about it? But really, why are we talking about it? What are the what are the statistics? Why is this meaningful? Why focus on college students? Um, how do we navigate this time together? I think a lot of times college students, both in school as well as recent college students, get looked over as far as coaching support. So I love the focus of the conversation, and you're just doing such great work out there.
And I will say the same for you. I enjoy following you on the social media platforms. You and the cat, the lap dog, as you refer to him, always have me chuckling with his funny pictures, which is also a good time to, a good opportunity to like chuckle and have some fun while we're online as well. So let me get into your bio. So we are going to be talking about how students and what students can be doing in order to be successful in as they graduate into this, or if they're looking for internships or opportunities to enhance their resumes during the summer. But what can they do in this current economic condition? When the pandemic began, the economic, the job market and the economic condition of the United States was in good condition, and since the pandemic hit, there are definitely industries which are suffering. Internships have been canceled, jobs have been removed from posting. So we're going to talk about all of that. So if you have any specific questions that you have for Lisa, I'm going to read her bio, and that'll tell you a little bit why I invited her back on, especially during this time. Definitely put those in the chat. So let's get started because Lisa has somewhere to go right after this. So I want to get in all my questions and all your questions before then. So Lisa is a success, life, and leadership coach. Prior to coaching, Lisa led a fulfilling career in recruiting and development for nonprofits, internet startups, and Fortune 500 companies. It was there during that time that she discovered that resilient transformations can always happen. And anytime the inspiration is given, inspirational commitments that individuals and teams can make. So, as I mentioned, I invited Lisa back on for a second time. I have more. I usually only have 10 questions, but I had so many things that I wanted to talk to her about. And like I said, we only have a short period of time with Lisa. So like I said, if you have questions, put them in the chat, but I already have my questions if you don't. So usually, Lisa, you've been on before. I usually ask the question, how did you transition from college to career? But I already asked you that last time. So I just want to jump straight into the question that is on everyone's mind.
Let's do
So
it.
for seniors who are graduating in May, we already had a crop of seniors who graduated last May. So both people are in a similar situation. They may not have done any preparation for what they're going to do after college because in my experience working with seniors, they don't usually think about it until, okay, I graduated, now what I'm going to do. So hopefully they're thinking about it now, considering what's going on. But for those students, what are some suggestions for how they can start to think about what they want to do for a job or a career when they graduate?
Well, I love the picture that you painted as far as people get to the end of college and then they go, oh no, oh crap, with expletives. What do I do now? I think that part of the college experience is to experience college, is to be present. And of course, there's that time frame where, final year, we need to start thinking about our future. And there's clinging onto our nest, onto what we know and what's familiar, because going from college to career is a big transition. So there's a lot that I can say on this topic, but I think that the most important thing that I want to start with is to start doing your work early. And that doesn't necessarily mean know what you want to do right away or have a job lined up halfway through your senior year. It just means start taking action, start talking to people, start talking to a coach, start talking to Phoenix, start looking at different podcasts, different books, just get interested. Sorry, my cat is making an appearance. Start getting interested in cats and in your career. One of the things that helped me most in college was to try a bunch of things through conversation. I spoke to a lot of different people. I spoke to a lot of my professors. I got their advice. I built relationships. I asked my parents to connect me with people in different industries, in the nonprofits, in the startup industry, and corporate. I honestly nurtured as many different connections as I possibly could to see what was out there, because I didn't know what I didn't know. I wanted to get as much of the lay of the land as I possibly could, knowing that it was only going to be a small piece. The other thing that I think really helps college students is starting to look at patterns of what you've enjoyed throughout college. There's always a pattern. Our desires leave clues. So there might be a class that you really liked. There might be a major you really liked, a professor, a topic, even if it's socializing, being president of a fraternity or a club, or, enjoying that film club you were a part of, being a member there. Look at the clues that your interest provides, like breadcrumbs, and start to piece together what it might look like to follow that industry, even if it means starting from the bottom and working your way up. Now, a tactical tip here is to look at what companies you consider cool, like the cool companies. I don't know, is it Bombas? Is it the Morning Brew? Is it Twitter? Is it Google? Why? And look at the why. Is it that, you like Google because they're huge and they have great benefits? Or do you like a company like Bombas that sells socks, but they donate 50% of their proceeds to a philanthropic endeavor? And what about it do you really enjoy? So oftentimes in a down economy, the best thing to take a look at is what companies are doing well, and then how can you get in the door there, even if it's the ground level, because companies that are doing well are going to keep doing well even in a down economy. So the most likely place for succession and moving up are those types of companies. Just stick your foot in the door, stick your nose where it doesn't belong, and get interested in those places.
Excellent. So I think you said a lot of important things there, and I just want to reiterate the fact that nurturing the relationships that you have, and I say this all the time, college is a unique opportunity where you're exposed to a host of different people who may have connections now or will have connections in the future. So nurturing those relationships. I'm glad I gave him a shout out earlier so people weren't like, what is that?
I know.
That is the lap dog that I was speaking of before.
She really wants to sit on my lap right now. So, okay, lap she gets. She's going to stay there.
So nurturing relationships is so key. And even if you had not thought about that before, I was talking to someone else regarding their college experience. And one of the things that she brought up, and I can't argue with the fact that, after college, people really didn't look at her GPA, but people always asked her if she knew such and such, or if she was familiar with such and such. So the networking is so essential. And oftentimes too often students focus on, I need to get a certain GPA, but building those relationships, nurturing those relationships is like second fiddle, or not considering that. So I think that is so important. And also
100%.
Yeah. And also for students who are still figuring, when I was thinking back on my college experience, I was not sure exactly what I was going to do when I graduate. There are certain majors that have clear career paths, and there are certain majors like mine, English, that is like, okay. And oftentimes, people ask that, so what are you going to do with that major? And at the time I was like, I don't know. So your advice with regard to, thinking about companies that you would want to work for, you're definitely gaining skills. If you have a major that's in the humanities, definite skills that will transfer to a lot of different occupations, but figuring out what you want, who do you want to work for? What is the impact that you want to work? Or if money is an inspiration for you, who do you want to work for? Is benefits. I actually have a student who works at or had a graduate. I always call them students, even if they're like 5, 10, 15 years after they graduated.
Well, student always a student.
Yeah, he's from here, he's actually from Vietnam, but he was here and he actually got a job after he graduated working for Microsoft. So he had to like up in everything and like travel across the country. He was obviously a technology major, but he actually had to figure out exactly, is this going to be something that I am interested in? Is this, Microsoft is a good company, but are there values? Is this really worth me going all the way across the country, leaving what I know? So thinking about all of those things is very key and very important. So thanks for those 2 tips. And if I didn't mention, get a pen, get a piece of paper. I have my notes here because I remember last time I talked to Lisa, I had like a page full of notes. So if you don't know, get some notes, get a notebook, get something to write with, because I have 13 questions. I don't know if we'll get through them, but there are some definite knowledge bombs that Lisa will be dropping throughout this.
You're the best.
If you have questions, put them in the chat. So one of the things, like I'm always like, one of the reasons why I started my business, and it's also like an offshoot of my job, is because I really, really love like the research and further investigating like all things college success, college career, all those things. So I was recently listening to a podcast, and I believe the person who was the guest on the podcast, her name is Michelle Weiss, and she used to work for Strata, which is a education company. But she was talking about the concept of the 100-year career. And, I know some people's like, oh no, I have no desire to work for 100 years. But the meaning behind that is, with advances in technology and, the lifespan of people is going to be longer. So thinking not necessarily about what you're going to do immediately after you graduate, but thinking of lifelong learning, what skills you're going to need, what types of, where's your career trajectory going to go. So it's likely that people can have careers that last for a long time. So what advice would you have for current students about thinking and planning with regard to not just now, but like long-term planning for their careers?
That's such an interesting visual, the 100-year career. And that idea. I'm sure that at some point advancement in human technology is going to get to the place where we're just living forever. But the other argument towards this idea is that people like the baby boomers need to work longer. They don't have the savings that they used to. And then the next generation, the Zennial generation, which I think is me, I think that's the next generation, we also don't have the same Social Security and the same retirement savings. And so we're going to have to work longer, and people are healthier. Also, people have 2, 3 careers at once. And so your question is really important. How do you plan for 2 to 3 careers? My answer is you don't. You plan for whatever is right in front of you and to the best of your abilities, what you know. So for instance, when I first graduated from college, by the way, I was an anthropology degree, like what the F am I going to do with that? I wasn't going to be an archaeologist. I wasn't going to be an Indiana Jones. But what I loved about it was human behavior. I loved seeing the cultural trends of why we are the way that we are because of our society, and how we play a role in perpetuating that, or how we can play a role in interrupting it. So that to me was fascinating. And honestly, I didn't know what I wanted to do with it, but I knew I wanted to do something with people and interactions with people. And so at first, I really wanted to go into the nonprofit sphere and help people and serve. I found Teach for America to be absolutely fascinating. I really jived with their message to bring education to as many people as possible, to see the connection in our culture between the wealth gap and the education gap, and then closing that gap. But that lasted for 2 years. That career was a 2-year thing. At the end of it, I was like, you know what? Nonprofits are great. They're not for me. And I ended up doing something else. So, you can plan to the best of your abilities for what you know, where you're at, and that's the best that you can do. And after that, the idea from a coaching standpoint is to constantly be curious about widening the lens of okay, well then what's next? Like what do I want that's bigger than this? Or what do I want that's broader than this? Who do I want to be on the planet? And that this idea that you have to find your passion, I think is a bit of a myth, because you can't find your passion. You have to it's a process, and your passion might change. And so I think the key is simply just to keep on getting curious about, well, what am I passionate about now? And how does that relate to my core values of things like service and community? And that might look different in a nonprofit. It might look different than in the startup company that I worked with. It looked different in corporate America. Then it certainly looks different as a coach now. So my advice is to look at the next 5 to 10 years, plan for that, but be really flexible in the process. Keep your eyes open, look for opportunities. You know, when I was thinking about your questions in advance, I wrote down that my experience is when people enter the workforce, they're first there to make money. Then they're there to make prestige. Then they're there to make an impact. I think when people first start, they think, well, I just need to get a job. I just need to make some money. And then once you get a job, start making some money, you look at, well, okay, well, now I want that title, or I want to lead, or I want a promotion. But in the end, I think what we're all after is some form of impact that aligns with our values. So find what's currently driving you and try to stick with that until you're super clear on what's next, because it will happen eventually, just not on our little myopic human timeline.
I love the way you answered that money, prestige, impact. That's why I invited you on a second time. I knew you would be wonderful with regard to, explaining like these different ways of thinking. And I also wanted to go back to, for those students who don't know, like us, who aren't in a career, who don't have majors that have a specific career trajectory, because one of the things that you brought up is that, you had an idea that you wanted to go into nonprofit. I, on the other hand, had an idea that I did not want to be a teacher because, as I said, people are like, what are you going to do with an English major? Are you going to be a teacher? And I'm like, no, I am not going to be a teacher. Umpteen years later. But the point is that you need to be open and explore and cultivate your curiosity. So after I graduated from college, again, I didn't have an idea of what I wanted to do, but I was fortunate enough to be at a school where I had an upperclassman who was in a program. She got a Fulbright scholarship and she was able to teach English in South Korea. She was also an English major. So I followed, I did the same thing. I graduated from college. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I went in to teach English in South Korea because, I had no other plans. So I did that. And like I said, I did not want to be a teacher, but, I was getting to go to a new country. It was a prestigious opportunity. And then when I came back, like I said, I was resistant to being in education. But when I came back, I was like, well, maybe it is, something that I'm interested in. And then I pursued that and cultivated that. And like I said, it's more than umpteen. It's more than umpteen years later. But many years later, I am the college success professor. I work at a college. My full career after that has been in education. So being open to possibilities, not saying I don't want to do that because, you may be wrong. Figuring out what you don't want to do. Like you said, that experience in a nonprofit lets you know you don't want to be in a nonprofit. And even if you've had internships and what have you in college, you don't necessarily get a full experience of what it really is like in the job, because most students, they spend a couple of years after they graduate, once they get a job, like job hopping, trying to like figure out exactly what they really want to do. So that's common. So I just wanted to really reiterate some of the points that you made with regard to that answer.
Absolutely. I have one last thing to add. My experience of you, Phoenix, is that no matter what you do, you're going to do it well. And I think that attributes to success just as much as anything else. So, when you were moving in and out of education and focusing on excellence, on providing a great experience, that probably set you up very well for success. So as we're going about our experience in life and our career, my advice is always to focus on experiences and excellence. Because if you do whatever you're doing really well, someone's going to notice, and you're going to get great recommendations, and you're going to get great referrals. So when you're ready to find your joy, you've already had and worked this muscle of excellence and of referrals and people having your back. So that's what I have to say.
No, I'm sorry I cut you off, because that was another good one too. Yes, experience. That's such good advice, because whatever you do, you should do it to the best of your ability. And like you said, you will get noticed. You will get, usually you will get rewarded for your hard work and your effort. And especially if it's something that, like, I've never taken a job that I really wasn't interested in and passionate about. And so especially, it's easier if it's something that you really are interested in and it's something that you're really passionate about. If you are, like you said, in the first, people are usually looking for, you have to pay your student loans, you're looking for money. Often, or sometimes, maybe 20% of the time, people know that they're interested in things and they can find a job that meets both, or they may have, a side hustle or an opportunity to volunteer where they can get that opportunity fulfilled. And then eventually, perhaps that can turn into a passion project or a career. But definitely, I would highly recommend, experience and excellence as well. So thank you for that. So for students who are graduating, in the spring, and you've talked about some coaching practices and some ways that people can work with coaches, but how specifically can working with a coach help with the career, the college to career transition, in your opinion, as an experienced coach?
I'm so excited by this answer. So I was speaking with another career coach about this the other day, and our conclusion is that you can get so many people to provide advice on your resume. Like, it's actually easy to get guidance on your resume these days. There's plenty of organizations out there where you pay a couple $100, you submit your resume, and they bring it back to you beautifully. So your resume, your GPA, and your experiences might get you through the door, but you get hired through an emotional connection with the recruiter. When it comes to interviewing and when it comes to the actual hiring, you and 2 or 3 other people, it's always some sort of emotional connection, relatability, and character that will actually tie the knot. And that, to me, it's interesting. I was so interested in coaching at the beginning, when I hired a coach before I became a coach as a recruiter. I was so interested in it for that very reason. I kept on seeing over and over again that the people that were getting hired in the organization were getting hired because of character. And so I then revised my own recruiting process for the recruiting department to focus on questions that developed or elicited character responses. We started bringing in quizzes that focused on character. How is their character? There's so many resumes that get submitted these days. I think recruiters have 3 to 5 seconds on average to decide if they look at it or not. And that's all the resume is for. That 3 to 5 seconds of, okay, do you have the experience? Do you have the background and the education? Oh, yes. Okay, great. Let's hop on the phone and talk. What gets you through the door is that emotional intelligence. And that's the thing that I work on with my clients, especially around careers. Emotional intelligence, luckily, is one of those offshoots of intelligence, and has data behind it. It has specific practices to take on. It's measurable, and it's much easier to improve your emotional intelligence than it is to improve your IQ. So working with a coach helps you to gain different skills that will last a very long time and are much more likely to get you hired and keep you hired when you're there. So that's the first thing.
I don't want to interrupt you again, but
No, that's okay. Did you have something to add?
No, I just wanted to, reiterate your point, or stress your point, because it's so important. Usually people are hiring, or oftentimes when you're looking at a job description or things like that, you're looking at the hard skills, that, what are the requirements of the job? If it's a tech job, can I code? Do I know this coding language, et cetera, et cetera. But those soft skills, like you just said, are what actually get you hired and what make you successful in the actual position long term. So yeah. But go ahead, finish your answer.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting what our brains go to in terms of justifying why we didn't get the job. It's I'm too old, or I'm too young, or my GPA wasn't high enough, or like I was having a bad day or something, rather than really looking at, okay, what are my gaps as far as my connection with that person? Like what's preventing me from having a vulnerable, real, trusting conversation with this person. So such an interesting, I would love to see the data behind like how recruiters actually hire, how many, and actually there is a statistic out there that recruiters will hire, number one, from character, like in the actual in-person interview. They'll hire first based on character, second based on resume, and third based on experiences. Actually, I think the experiences and resume are flipped. So resume is the last one. So yeah, focus on the emotional connection, and coaches can really, really help you out with that. And then of course, you probably work on this all the time, Phoenix, helping students really clarify, well, what do I really want? I think gone is the era where finding a steady paycheck is enough. This is the era where people are much more interested in passion and impact and finding joy in what they do, and there are infinite ways to do that. So we have to get better at understanding our patterns, ourselves, our potential career sabotage, and then ways to strengthen our superpowers without becoming complacent in other areas.
Yeah, and that's so important because, as I mentioned earlier, when students graduate, they're often job hopping, trying to figure out what they want, and so focusing on, focusing on the job that is fulfilling you, and not just the money. If you have both, that's even better. But if you're able to find the job that is fulfilling to you, you're likely to stay longer, because you'll be closer to your final destination, for lack of a better word, because you're job hopping maybe because you want a better pay, but you're also job hopping because you haven't quite found the right fit. And so as you get more self-awareness and understanding of what really motivates you and drives you and is inspiring to you, if you go towards that rather than towards the money, you'll likely be more fulfilled. Because I know in your business you work with women, I think mainly women, who may have not necessarily focused on what they really wanted, and maybe focused on finding money, and as you mentioned, money, prestige, impact. So hopefully you can get to that impact phase closer if you're really focused and tuned in on that from the start.
Brilliant. What you said.
Thank you. All right. So we're only on number 4 now. We're halfway through. All right. I need to stop interjecting. So I always tell students to build a support team for their time in college, because they're transitioning to a whole new world, a whole new environment. But I also think it's important for students to have a support team throughout their whole life. So specifically with regard to their careers, who do you think should be on a student's transition from college to career on that type of success team?
In my notes, my first answer is great question. I love this question. This is one of the first things that I do when I'm working with someone who's a career coaching client. So you're right, in terms of my demographic, I tend to work with females, but I also work with people across the spectrum on career coaching and nurturing their relationships, nurturing what they really want, and really getting them hired. And so the first thing that I have career coaching clients do is to make a list of all the people in their life that love them and want them to win. And I call this the champions list. Everyone needs to have a champions list. People that they can go to for advice, or that they can go to and say, hey, do you have any connections in this area to Google or to a tech company? Or do you know of anyone that I can talk to who might have connections in that area? The people who, some people call them nodes, those who are connected, those who are mayors in their own network, or who are super connectors. They're just out there and uber connected. You can also find people like this by going to networking events, by looking on LinkedIn. There's just a lot of different ways to do this. So besides the champions, Specifically, I would absolutely have a squad of mentors and advisors with you. So when I was graduating from college, I was very close to my two professors that I worked with to do my anthropology. I think it was a senior dissertation. It was called basically a big project at the end for my major. I was really close with them. I had long conversations with them. They gave me lots of advice. I also got very close to the woman who ran the career center for Bucknell. And I was actually half thinking of basically finding out how to get her job, because it was such an interesting job. I loved her. She was amazing. Like, how do I work in a university in this way to help people get careers? My parents happen to be pretty, like, my parents are extroverts. They're out there. They're always talking to people. They got great friends. My dad was part of the Rotary Club in Princeton, New Jersey. So I was like, holy crap, that is a great place to network. So he took me along on like daddy-daughter days at the Rotary Club. I made a bunch of connections there. And then I also really just looked at my network. Who did I know from high school? Who did I know who already graduated? I think if you're connected to other graduates that graduated before you, that is a great source. What type of advice do they have, given that you graduated from the same place? I think having some sort of counselor or coach is always great if you have access to one. Last but not least, if you have access to a recruiter friend that you can just speak with to get some insider advice as to how recruiters think, that is a great place. That's actually how I got my connection to Teach for America. I knew the recruiter who came to Bucknell because she was a graduate 2 years ago, and I played soccer with her. And so we sat down and talked, and she was like, you would be a great candidate for this. You might want to think about this. She gave me lots of great advice. So that's my list. Oh, I think you're still on mute.
I have children running behind me in the background, so I put myself on mute. But we have a follow-up question from someone watching. So I was an introvert too, so I can relate to this question. So how can students who are introverts do well at networking, I guess is the question.
Yeah, that's a great question, Tori. Thanks for asking too. As an introvert, sometimes it's hard to ask questions. And so I acknowledge your question asking. So I have a couple of different answers to this. I think the first is that as an introvert, some introverts will not want to be in big crowds or big groups, but they really treasure and appreciate one-on-one conversations. Honestly, I'm a weird combination of extrovert and introvert. I'm more extroverted than introvert, but when I was younger, I didn't like big crowds, even though I really liked people. I call myself an extrovert with social anxiety. But any way that you can create one-on-one conversations is such a win-win. And if you're the type of extrovert that enjoys one-on-one conversations but not crowds, find ways that you can do that. So a simple method to this is simply asking people for connections. Like get your top 10 champions, have one-on-one conversations with them and map it out over a couple of weeks to set up conversations, and then ask them for connections to other people. And that way you can stay in that realm of trusted one-on-one conversations, and you can prep yourself for it too. I know when I was younger, I needed to like work myself up to have conversations. Now it's much more natural. My social anxiety pretty much doesn't exist. I love people all the time, always, which is really cool. Thanks to coaching, I can let my extrovert flag fly. But that's my first response. I think the second thing that I want to say about introverted networking is that in the age of digital, it is so easy to do. LinkedIn, nurture your connections on LinkedIn, reach out to people and just be real. When you're building a templated message, it's not real. Don't go the template message route. And comfort yourself in knowing that it's actually rare and really honoring the person to create a message on LinkedIn and say, hey, Phoenix, I love what you're doing. I'm a little nervous in sending this because I know that you're really busy, but I would love to have the opportunity to talk to you because I don't know what I want to do after college. And I know you'd have so much advice. Maybe we can get a virtual coffee. I could buy you coffee when the pandemic lifts, but would you be interested in meeting? A message like that, holy crap. Like that cuts through all the BS that happens on LinkedIn. All the, like get your career in 2 minutes with this 10 question and answer worksheet. But you got to buy it for $500. So that's my answer to Tori. It's a great question.
And I have a quick, as a actual introvert, like people see me on this platform and they're like, you're not an introvert, but I really am. And as everyone who has been a guest on my shows knows, like I have the questions prepared. I've done a lot of, pre-planning in advance because as an introvert, it makes me feel more comfortable to be prepared. So I would recommend the same thing. And especially on platforms like LinkedIn, if you can do research on a person and like really ask them, like people love talking about themselves. So even though I'm an introvert, like I ask questions to get people to talk about themselves because I prefer to listen and engage in that way. And by preparing and doing some research in advance, you can be even more dynamic at it and even perhaps do a podcast of your own on a topic of your interest. As an introvert myself, I have a podcast. So like doing that research and like having people talk about themselves is always my two strategies when I'm like in situations where I have to do networking, which I do not enjoy, but I do, sometimes you also have to think about the long-term benefits of doing something that you don't necessarily enjoy. So that would be my 2 cents on that.
That's brilliant. Yeah. And do it in a way that suits your personality. So if that one-on-one connection, if a podcast connection works for you, then absolutely nurture that and do what you need to do to prepare yourself. Maybe it's like make a list of questions. Maybe it's practice powerful questions in a conversation so that you get people talking about themselves. But my mentor said, you cannot deny the significance of making people feel significant. So don't worry about feeling like you're a bother by reaching out to people or no one's going to respond. If you genuinely bring yourself and you ask and honor who that person is for you, oftentimes they're going to want to talk about themselves.
Yeah. And everyone loves, younger people. So like, especially if you're a college student and especially like if you're reaching out to alumni at your university who may have a similar major or be at a company that you're interested in, as a, put that plug in there, I have your same major or find a point of connection with that person. So definitely, there are definitely ways to do it, even though you're an introvert. All right. So let me get down to my next question. This is a common thing that's actually present right now. So one of the common fears and anxieties that graduating seniors have is about the uncertainty. We all have this, like, what is next? What's really going to happen? What will our future hold? So what do you have? What suggestions do you have for students who are dealing with that uncertainty and anxiety about, not knowing what's going to happen in the future?
Yeah. So I think certainty is way overrated. Truly, if we take a look at what happened to our economy and to the state of the world in the past year and a half, if that isn't proof that certainty is overrated, I don't know what is. We cannot predict the future and we cannot predict what happens. But what we can do is prepare for the unexpected by having a strong network, a strong community to support you when things don't go as planned. What's much more important than having things that are guaranteed and trying to control things is having flexibility, creativity, and agility. And this comes from pushing the boundaries on what you feel is safe. It comes from taking little risks or big risks, little acts of courage or big acts of courage. It takes having a strong community and building connections with those community. At first, strategically, I had to learn how to build connections and what did that actually mean. Luckily, as a recruiter right out of college, I learned how to do that because I had to in my job. But there's lots of ways to do that. There's master classes on it. There's articles and YouTube videos on how to nurture relationships. I want to give a quick example. So when I was working for a startup company, I actually had a really tragic experience, and the boss that I had, who I loved, left. Actually, several people had left, and our startup company got acquired. And the person who came in was a classic workplace bully. And since I was the HR manager and I basically supported the C-level people, it was just not a great experience for me. And I didn't have the tools that I have now. I didn't have the emotional intelligence or the awareness or the leadership skills that I do now to be able to handle that confrontation. So I just made it worse. So what I ended up doing was I got to the end of my rope and I just quit. It was the first time that I had quit pretty much anything. And this was, I think, back in 2011. So the economy was not great. And I had not planned for this. I had never planned to quit. But I reached a point where I was so unhappy. I was so stressed. I had lost all this weight. I was being unhealthy. And I knew that I just had to do something. And I started looking for jobs, but I gave my 2 weeks notice as I was starting to look for jobs. It's like, I need out. So what helped me during this time was having an incredible support community. My boyfriend at the time, now husband, was also very supportive. And I spoke with a lot of people. I was still very close with my coworkers. And so I asked. Who do you know? Where can I apply to? What would I be good at? I just kept on having conversations. And honestly, pretty quickly, I was recruited and hired by Northwestern Mutual to run the recruiting department through a connection. So this is all to say, plan as best as possible, but don't be attached to if it works out or not. Be much more interested in your agility and supporting yourself for when things don't go as planned. Nothing is permanent or lasting.
True. Very true. I'm going to skip ahead on a couple of questions and hopefully get a chance to go back in because in my research for our interview, I was able to find a survey that was done with actual students who had graduated or were in college and about to graduate. And I have some direct quotes, and I wanted to get your reaction to some of the questions and or concerns that these students had. And this was done like this past semester, so it's really recent. So this is a graduate student at Penn State, and she wrote, I'm nervous that I'll jump into the first available position and be miserable and anxious instead of feeling like I can look around for a job that suits me. What advice would you give for her?
Oh, this is another really, really great topic. So what I hear as a coach around this question and this statement is that there's an either or embedded in this question. Either I'll jump into the first available position and be miserable, or I don't jump into anything and look for the thing that's right for me. There is a prevalent either or mentality when it comes to job seeking that gets people really stuck. And it's that black, white, either or, right, wrong mentality that keeps people from seeing and jumping on opportunities. And it has people in that I can either settle or wait for the perfect job, but both are actually losing situations because you'll never have the perfect job, even if you have the perfect job. I mean, look at me. I'm living my purpose on the planet, but it is not a perfect experience. Certainly not all the time. I have more moments of it because I've found what I'm meant to do, but it's not perfect. And then the settling mentality, like jumping into this first position, the first position that you find, is also a losing situation because you come in with this mindset that I'm above this is below me. So either there's like this, I deserve better sort of entitlement mentality, or this, I'm not good enough to get the job that I want. There's I'm not good enough or a entitlement. So What's happening in COVID, in my belief, is that COVID and the down economy is only amplifying anxieties that are already there. People already have this mentality, this either or, settle or perfection. What this does, what the down economy does, is simply heighten that anxiety. There's more stress that's compounding. So what if instead you put down your ego, you supported your current self, and you continue to work for the long-term vision? So oftentimes I hear stories of people who take on this job that they think is going to be crap, and they end up finding the perfect position because they work hard and they know someone and they get a referral and they get cross promoted to a different department, and then voila, they find this great job. I mean, that's kind of how life works. You look at where the opportunity is, you take a risk, but always keep looking at what else you can do. I mean, there's this idea that there's a perfect job out there, but there's no guarantee that there's going to be a better job. So that doesn't mean take the first thing that comes to you, but also take a look at, okay, well, even if this job doesn't pay me as much or it's not the title that I want, there's actually opportunities to move up. There's opportunities to grow into that role. I like this company. So that's why I at first talked about looking at the companies that you find that are cool. When I was first hired by the startup company, I was a receptionist. But it was a startup incubator company that incubated companies like Business Insider. So I actually worked with Henry Blodgett and a couple of the other executives when they had 5 people there. And look at Business Insider now. I mean, it's crazy. Gilt Group was another one of them. So I took a look at where the opportunities were, even if the title and the pay was below what I wanted. I'm like, you know what? Experience and excellence. I'm going to work my ass off. I'm going to be the best damn receptionist that people can possibly find. And within a year and a half, I had moved up into an HR assistant role.
I love that. And that actually segues. I'll see if I can squeeze in 2 more questions to one of the questions that I was going to ask next, possibly 2. So what are some common mistakes? And I think you alluded to one with regard to having, I thought that this job is beneath you, or not being willing to accept certain responsibilities. But what are some common mistakes that people make early in their careers that you think students can learn from?
Well, I think the first thing is the settling mindset that we were talking about, this idea that either I get the exact job that I deserve or I settle for something that I really don't deserve. I think that's a pretty common mistake. Keeping your eyes open. I like the idea of sticking your nose where it doesn't belong and asking and being hungry and eager. That will go so much farther than your credentials. So my advice is to try things, explore, get curious, take risks, take on things that, seem kind of interesting, even if the pay isn't quite there, but always be looking to excel and willing to learn and implement feedback. So the biggest piece of advice that I would give any college student is to get really good at receiving feedback and implementing feedback, just like an athlete would for their performance. So we get so defensive around growth as human beings, like, oh, I should be perfect by now. No, you're never perfect. Learn to accept feedback and to see it as an opportunity to nurture. Just like a plant needs to get watered, it needs light, it needs to be moved every now and then. So do you. So drop the ego driving the bus and really look at allowing yourself to be open and grow. So my opinion is that you will always be more likely to succeed, to be promoted and be hired if you are open, eager, and in action, which includes asking for feedback, implementing the feedback, and looking at, your own developmental plan. What am I learning? What skills am I implementing? Am I moving the needle on what my boss said I needed to work on? What can I do more of? What other project can I take on? What creative juices can I work? Having a work ethic and showing a work ethic is so paramount. I think people think a college education will automatically guarantee a job. And while a college education is so powerful, all it does is increase the odds of the door opening. That's all it does. You have to walk through the door and earn it and be in process of playing that long game of embracing feedback, learning, and ascending. The Art of Ascension should be a book title.
That's your next book.
That's my next book, The Art of Ascension.
All right, I'm going to squeeze one more question in, and then I'll share how people can work with you. Because you bring up a good point with regard to students and their mindset. And I think based on my experience with students who graduated last fall, we have some students who are still looking for jobs at this point. And, oftentimes when students, especially if they haven't thought about it or done any planning in advance, it'll take a while. And that often has some feelings of self-doubt and, self-worth that come with that. So what would be your advice for students who are dealing, who may not be able to find a job immediately, even though they followed all the wonderful advice and guidance that we talked about today? What would be your advice or guidance for them?
Yeah. I mean, have grace with yourself in the process, get lots of support. And also, if you're still in college, make the most of your college experience by looking at things like creative endeavors, leadership positions, being active, finding internships, focus on one area and excel. I mean, so learning new things and taking up leadership roles does a couple of things. It increases your confidence, and it also sets you apart because then you have something you can bring to your potential employer and say, like, hey, I did this thing. Like, I was a leader in this way. Another thing that creates confidence is learning a new skill, especially a new skill that is highly desired, like digital design or social media, marketing, computer programming. There's a lot of easy ways to set yourself apart. And, it's really hard being a young person with lots of feelings and lots of insecurities about your own self-worth. I absolutely empathize. I was one of them. I spent so many years trying to manage my own insecurities, and I honestly couldn't figure it out until I found coaching 9 years ago. I was like, what the heck is wrong with me? How do I adult with these big emotions and big insecurities? What are other people doing? So know that you're not the only one to have self-doubts, but also take a look at, what brings meaning to your life. Is it volunteering? Is it your family? Is it friendships? Look to other sources besides your career to get value. We have an over-focus on our jobs to give us everything in life. We think our jobs are going to give us confidence, value, self-worth, well-being, money, friendships, romance. It's not our job's job to do that. Our job's job is a bartering role. We barter our time for money. That's it. So finding different avenues to get value and get worth is so, so, so important. So nurture friendships, nurture relationships. I think if you stay open and stay active and talk to people, get good at getting people, you'll actually find the job will follow. And then lastly, define what a good job is for you. Like, really define it past the title, past the numbers. Like, what's your conditions of satisfaction for a good job? Is it the people? Is it the place? Is it the service, the impact? And define that. And a coach can help you with that. Phoenix can help you with that. There's a lot of good journaling prompts out there. So I'm going to stop there. I got other things to add, but I know we're coming up on time.
All right. I'm going to let you share how people can work with you. Tori, I have not forgotten you. I will answer that question, or Lisa can add it to her final thoughts and comments if she can. I don't know even know if you can see the question. But I'll deal with it. Don't worry about it. Do you have any final tips or advice for students before you leave, and how they can work with you, or any final suggestions or tips that you can offer to our audience?
I would say, if anything, work on your emotional intelligence. It hasn't become harder to get a job, but it's become less of a focus to work on your emotional intelligence. And it's certainly tougher in a large workforce to set yourself apart. So build on your self-awareness, work with a coach, work with a therapist, work with a counselor, do your own work, journal, meditate, all those things that we don't teach in school and we don't learn in school, do that, because you'll find that progress will happen when you learn more about yourself and how to be in the world. Other than that, I mean, there's lots of different ways to support yourself out in the world. Working with a coach like me, there's different communities and career advancement courses you can take. I work with people one-on-one in small groups, and I also provide a lot of free webinars and workshops as much as I possibly can, especially given the state of our economy, and we're all isolated and virtual anyways. So you can follow me on Instagram, Coaching with LP. You can look me up on LinkedIn, Lisa Pachence. And I also have a Facebook community called Coaches Creating Community, which is a wonderful place to share resources, get resources, ask for advice, network. And there's lots of activities that we do in that group.
I would concur with that. I am a member of the group, and there's always some good fun. And the lap dog who's on her lap lord, I forget the name.
Lap lord
is always making it. I think it was some funny pictures of him the other day that had me cracking up.
Oh my God, with its tongue sticking out. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for spending some time. I know you have somewhere to go. So I will just finish out without you, but thank you again for squeezing me in and sharing all of your wonderful words of wisdom with the audience today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for welcoming me back. I had such a good time the first time around. I was so excited. I was actually pulling your coattails like, Phoenix, when can we do this again? So really, really enjoyed myself. Thanks for who you are. Thanks for being the college success professor. So many people need what you have, and I really appreciate the community you generate through these podcasts, through you being on social media. I know it impacts so many people's lives, so thank you.
Thank you so much. And you'll likely be on again.
I hope so.
All right. Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful night. Bye, everyone.
Bye. All right. Now, Tori, I said I would get to your question. So let me do my best to answer this question. So we were talking about feedback, I think, in the question before that Lisa had answered. And your question is, how does a student accept and interpret feedback that references, I believe, you're not professional enough? And how do you figure out what needs to change, or ask what's a good work ethic? How do you ask them what's a good work ethic, or what you're lacking? So I would answer this question, and I'll move it because it's a long question. I would answer this question in two ways. And being receptive to feedback is definitely a skill that you're not necessarily taught. Usually when you get feedback in college, it's, how your grades, or, your paper being marked up by a professor. So we're not necessarily taught how to receive feedback. And I'm going to make the assumption that the person who is giving you this feedback is someone who is an advocate of you, or they're not necessarily, looking down on you. They're trying to actually help you. So from that perspective, if the person is saying that you're not professional enough, they may be a veteran at the company and know the culture of the company. So they may be trying to help you in that way. What is considered acceptable behavior or appropriate behavior in one work environment can be different than another work environment. So I would take that with a positive attitude, and then, ask some follow-up questions. If there is an opportunity, or if that person is someone who you respect and admire, you might want to ask them if they would be interested in, either having just a one-on-one conversation with you with specific things that you may be able to work on, if they would be interested in having like a mentoring type relationship with you, that could also be helpful. And then always, I am a strong advocate for personal development and professional development. And oftentimes when you sit back, and if you're observant, if you're curious, if you're looking around at someone who, has a position that maybe you aspire to be one day, they can be your mentor in your head, or someone that you aspire to be. So modeling, what they're doing, things that they're investing their time and energy in. If there's some sort of training program at your job that focuses on leadership, or or development, or even just books in general, reading different books about, people who you don't know, thought leaders in your industry, thought leaders and that you would like to be like, people who are really known in your field or industry, reading their biographies or autobiographies about them, about things that they have done, that can give you some valuable lessons and things that you would benefit from. So that would be my answer. Definitely, if not that person, find someone in your organization who could be a mentor for you. If there are any training opportunities at the company that you think you would benefit from, and just ask them, is it the way that you're dressing that's not professional? Is it the way that you're speaking that they say is not professional? So ask some questions with real curiosity, not necessarily being defensive, but ask questions about being professional that will give you some insights. And you can decide whether or not you agree with their assessment or not. It's also good to, get feedback from others if you feel comfortable asking other people. There's this assessment. It's called the 360-degree assessment. I've done it before when I took a business class, or your reflective best self assessment. I think if you Google that, it'll come up. But basically what that assessment does is it asks you to identify 10 people. And it's these questions that they ask you about how you're perceived, and, what your strengths are, what areas you can improve. So actually investigating that and doing like your own self-reflection about, and then identifying areas that you think you would like to improve upon. So that would be my answer to that question. I hope that was helpful. I am going to end the conversation for today. I hope it was valuable. I hope it was informative. I hope that those students who are graduating in this spring and have graduated this past spring, will heed some of the advice and words of wisdom that was provided in this discussion today. I will continue to talk about this because I know it's an important topic and it's an important concern. If you follow me on my social media channels, I'm always posting about it and giving advice and guidance on this topic, because I know that students are often, you spend all this time and money and energy in college, and then you graduate and you're not sure what to do with yourself, especially now. So it's my goal and my mission to support students to be successful and to help them in their transition to college, and also when they transition from college to their careers. So again, thank you for your time. I hope you all have a lovely evening, and I will see you next week, where I have actually Tori, who's in the chat. I have her talking about, for those of you who are parents or those of you who are planning to go to college, you're not quite in college. We'll talk about the college planning process and some tips and words of wisdom, because that is her area of specialty. I often get questions about it, but that's not my necessarily area of specialty. I focus on the students when they're in college. So join us next week, same time. I believe it's 6:30 next week. But enjoy your evening. Thank you.